It might not look like it, but this is what peak physical performance looks like. For me, anyway. 12 months ago, I set myself the goal of actively trying to build as much muscle as naturally possible for the first time in several years. And today, I have the DEXA scan results from day 1, 6 months in, and 12 months in to see how I've gone. We'll get to them in just a sec. But this begs the question, if you're trying to build muscle, increase strength, or improve performance for a sport or for life, should you be putting on body fat? And if so, how much is too much? Because the latest trend over the last few years has been maingaining or recomping to build muscle or lose fat. This idea that the best way to build muscle is to avoid the traditional methods of bulking and cutting, and instead eat to maintain your current body weight or body fat, and make smaller marginal improvements.
What's maingaining? It's when you just eat the same amount of food to keep the same shreds, the same amount. Every week you look in the mirror and you're like, yeah, I like what I look like still.
It'll be slower, but it avoids putting on body fat that you just have to diet off later, and it avoids the risk of losing muscle from chronic dieting. Now, it definitely works, and it's a worthwhile strategy for many people and makes a lot of sense on paper. But unfortunately, it's not quite that simple. This study here may help shed some light on it. A group of experienced bodybuilders were split into 2 different test groups. Both would train 6 days a week and eat in a calorie surplus to support growth. But one group would eat at a significantly higher surplus than the other. The results are somewhat unsurprising. The higher calorie group put on more weight and more muscle mass than the lower calorie group. But they also put on 6 times as much body fat. This means the lower calorie group put on a higher ratio of muscle to fat, although it was less weight overall. This seems like a compelling argument for at the very least taking a slower approach and maybe even something like maingaining or recomping. However, if you look at the specifics of the study, you'll see a lot of inconsistencies. In the lower calorie group, some of them got leaner, some put on body fat, some saw only very small increases in muscle mass, and one poor guy wound up losing muscle mass despite eating in a calorie surplus and training hard. Whereas the higher calorie group had everybody significantly increasing muscle mass. While this shows us that eating less calories will result in less fat gain, it could also mean significantly less muscle mass gains and maybe even no gains despite putting in a lot of effort. Now, what this is really telling us is something we probably already know. Muscle building is hard, slow, and extremely individual. There will always be outliers and individual circumstances to consider, but if you wanted to guarantee progress, you're most likely going to be better off following the traditional bulking approach of not just eating at maintenance, but eating in a surplus, and to get comfortable with the idea of putting on some body fat. So what did I achieve over the past year? This is an 11 kilogram difference in 12 months. I added 5.7 kilograms of body fat and 6 kilograms of lean mass. Now, not to toot my own horn, but this is a fantastic result. And this is also from training just 3 days a week in the gym for about an hour with workouts that weren't 100% focused purely on building muscle. I could have trained more and would probably have gained more muscle mass if I did so and used a more targeted bodybuilding approach. But part of my goals were to also add a high volume of running and athletic work into my program for the first time ever. So I've been doing 2 to 3 long runs a week and built myself up from barely being able to run for 5 minutes straight to comfortably doing 10 kilometers or over an hour of running, which is a huge achievement for me personally. So I've got more muscle mass and I'm stronger and I'm more athletic and aerobically fitter than I was 12 months ago. But why don't I look like it? There's 2 reasons. The obvious reason is the illusion of body fat. I've got a small frame and I tend to store body fat more in my midsection and around my face. So in clothes and when I'm not posing or on a pump, I look really unimpressive. Anybody else who made similar gains to me but with a different body could easily wind up looking more impressive or maybe less impressive. But I also think we might have a very misconstrued view on what peak physical performance and readiness actually looks like, and the difference between how you look when you're making big improvements across the board versus how you look when you peak for a specific event. As anybody who has ever been exceptionally lean will ever tell you, it's also when you're at your weakest, most irritable, and most resistant to making progress. As for many athletes competing across sports who are in incredible shape, this is often how they look in season for a short period of time in competition, but outside of it through their improvement seasons, they would struggle to maintain the same condition. Body fat isn't just stored energy that can be accessed as a fuel source when needed. It also directly influences hormones like leptin, which directly impacts our appetites, mood, and overall energy levels. This is part of the reason why, while it's possible to build muscle as you lose fat, it's much easier to do so if you have more body fat to begin with. Because building muscle doesn't just require hard training, but it also requires enough resources for recovery. And if you don't have a ton of body fat and aren't eating well above maintenance, you're making things a lot harder than they need to be. And if you're doing cardio, running, or sports like jiu-jitsu, bouldering, or whatever the cool kids are into these days on top of this like I did, it becomes even more challenging. Running and cardio isn't necessarily bad for your gains, but it's a stressful activity, and it's not the same stress as lifting. Lifting helps to trigger the hormones and signals that we want for muscle building, whereas cardio does the complete opposite. Now, what does all this mean for you? If you're looking at making some serious progress in muscle mass, strength, and performance, you need to accept the idea of putting on some body fat. A good rule of thumb may be to aim for around a 1-to-1 ratio of lean mass to fat gain or better. So if I put on 1 kilo of muscle and also put on 1 kilo of fat, I'm good. And if I put on 2 kilos of muscle and 1 kilo of fat, it's even better. And if I put on 1 kilo of muscle and 2 kilos of fat, it's probably not good. But even then, you might very well be an outlier who needs this approach. If this sounds really frustrating right now, it's because it kind of is. No one can give you a perfect definitive answer. You have to find that out for yourself by tracking your progress so you can start to identify your own personal trends on how much of a surplus you need to be in order to see consistent improvements over time in and out of the gym, and what that means in terms of body weight and body fat increases. Maingaining or recomping might be a more acceptable approach for periods when you're not looking at making a ton of progress because you're already close to your goals, or when you're just starting out, or when you're coming off a long layoff or an injury, or if you're using steroids. If you're not in any of those categories, using strategic bulking periods where your body fat may increase over extended periods of time gives you a huge advantage to making the improvements that you want faster. This isn't an excuse to get lazy in your diet and pig out all the time. You've still got to track what you're doing and be consistent with your diet and train harder than ever to get the most out of that food. But I think you'll be surprised with just how much progress you can make when you stop being afraid of body fat increases and chasing the perfect Maingaining or Recomp formula.
You might not like it, but this is what the peak male athletic form looks like, and there ain't a fucking thing you can do about it.
If you followed this advice and have made some exceptional progress and are now ready to start stripping some of that extra body fat, check out this video here. And if you've already watched that one, YouTube thinks this one here is perfect for you.